Hi, everybody. I am Tom,
I'm Luke.
and this is Chess 123. Thanks for tuning in to us this week. We are going to go over the second part of mastering the end game.
Yep, and this is really cool for us because, like we mentioned last week, and if you guys are watching, we went through the beginner portion, so the part one. But as I mentioned last week, we're going through this book, Silman's complete endgame course from beginner to master. So we're literally systematically going through this thick material, and I had done some blogging on it on chess.com and kind of using that as a framework based on each chapter. But all this content is coming straight from his book, and it's fantastic because it makes sure that you're not missing any aspect as you continue to progress in your levels. So without further ado, this week is part two, and it's technically, he coined it as, ratings 1,000 to 1,199 or 1,200. And so if you've played chess online or whatever, and you kind of know where you're at, this is stuff that is really helpful to build upon what we learned last week. So as last week, we have here our board that I'm now clearing out. So it's a blank board, and we're going to set up some positions to go systematically through the material so we can all learn it together. And first let me just give you a brief overview of what we're going to be going over. We're going to be going over what can mate versus a lone king, like which pieces, which kind of touches on last week. We're going to be going more in depth on bishop versus queen, knight versus queen, how to use your king, general principles, what is opposition, a really crucial element of endgame material, and then also some different nuances with rook pawns that aren't like other places where pawns are. So yeah, really excited about this. And what I'm going to do first is we're going to go ahead and look at Tom. I don't know if you want to set up the just a random, a couple kings on the board with like a bishop on one side and then a queen on the other side.
Two bishops?
Maybe just one bishop for starters. One bishop, and then the other team has just a queen. Okay, perfect. So you guys, this is essentially, I guess before we go into this, I want to specify that one of the things in this chapter that he covered was, again, what can mate versus a lone king. Now, last week we mentioned about if you have a queen or two queens versus a lone king. Also, we mentioned if you have two rooks versus a lone king and a combination, a queen and a rook. Those are all fairly simple wins if you understood how to use the stair method as well as the box method if there's one. But then we start getting into a little bit more nuanced pieces, such as what you're looking at here. And in this case, there isn't just a lone king that black has, but black actually has a bishop as well. And so this is a little bit more tricky just because you now have to watch out for another piece instead of doing what you'd normally do with the box method with the queen. So we mentioned, and Tom, I'll let you kind of interject here, but we mentioned last week how with this position, if you did not have a bishop as black, then white's goal would simply be to box in the king, get him to a side, and then march your king over and then checkmate. And you just have to be careful for stalemates. But this time, this bishop is a little bit of a nuance, but not too much. And Tom, you want to give a little bit of thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I mean, just in general, like there are some obvious things that you want to look out for, right? So coming down here, obviously, bad move. Don't do that with your queen as white's move, because you just get the capture with the bishop, and then you run into a stalemate. What Luke's talking about in terms of bringing that queen down and boxing in the king, that's right there. That's not a terrible move for white. They're not going to lose the game by that, but it's certainly not as dynamic as what you're really looking for. The primary thing that I'm looking for initially when I have a queen versus a bishop and a king is forking opportunities. That's the first thing that I'm going to look at is any opportunity to fork the king with the bishop to be able to capture. But that being said, here's a problem that you're going to encounter right there. There's a fork. That looks awesome, right? Going to take that bishop, but you get
Yeah.
and then you're not going to get it. So that's the big start, and the problem really occurs there because we've ended on a black square.
Yes.
And it turns out this bishop, no matter where it is on the board, it will always be on a black square.
Precisely.
Black square bishop. The queen, however, unless I move the bishop, because I can't. The queen, however, is capable of moving to every square on the board. So easy way to avoid all trouble altogether with your queen is to stay on the light squares. Easy rule of thumb, as long as my queen is on a light square, as long as my king is on a light square, that bishop is never going to hit him. Oops.
Yep. So yeah, so that really, you guys, is all that you need to remember for that. Like Tom said, looking for forking opportunities is certainly a plus. But as far as being careful dynamics, you just have to, if you want to play it super safe, he actually mentioned in this chapter that basically if you keep your queen on a color that's not the dark colors, it's not on the other person's bishop, then you'll have a really easy game. I mean, sure, you got to maneuver around the bishop a bit, but it's really not hard. I mean, at first glance, it might seem a little challenging for a beginner, but that's really all you have to need to be aware of. And if you keep your king on light squares, you'll never, ever, ever have to worry about that bishop attacking it. So it's kind of one of those things where, so I guess if we were to play it out here, Tom, let's switch it so that it's actually a position that is legit movement. Okay, so from here, Tom, do you want to play as white and then I'll play as black?
Sure.
Okay, so now I'm gonna go, let's see. Okay. We're putting ourselves on the spot, you guys. But this is how we learn, you know, like once you learn the elements and the principles, it's a matter of implementing them. So what Tom's done here is actually really fantastic. He's trying to disconnect my king from my bishop. And now I have to watch out for forking opportunities a lot now. Tom has a fork right here if I move my bishop over here. And then if I move my bishop this way, well, then again, you know, there's a lot of forking options. So at this point, I think, oh boy, I think I'm going to go right here. It's probably a bad move, but hey.
I feel really good right now. I feel like I have a good chance of winning this game.
Yeah, I think that's one of the helpful things to remember. Again, this is not a hard win. It may be time consuming. That's about it. Okay.
Again, I'm checking for my forking opportunities if I have them. And you'll notice that his king is slowly getting pushed into a corner. That's kind of what, again, I'm trying to do, because I'm going to have a similar mating pattern. And again, I'm keeping my pieces on those light squares. I've created this box that king is now stuck in.
No, let's go there. Believe it or not, watching for forks from my perspective with the bishop and king is really tricky. It's really stressful to try to, because again, I'm thinking of going here, but then what does his queen do? Pops right there and then gets a fork. So this is no easy feat for sure.
And that's what's really advantageous about having the queen here too, is as long as I just maintain that simple principle of not putting my queen on a dark square, I don't have to worry about it being captured.
Exactly.
Oh, you moved, didn't you?
Yeah, sorry, your turn.
I missed that, sorry.
Okay. So I think I'm just going to go straight back here. So Tom's almost succeeded in getting me to the side. Okay. I was thinking of moving my bishop here, but then there's soon to be 14 opportunities. Let's go right there. Great. Oh, great. What do I do with the bishop? Can you put it back?
It disappeared.
No, it's wait. Just a second. I got it. Okay.
That's one of those secret moves in chess.
So I was gonna go here, but then I saw Tom had this with the fork on both pieces. Okay. Good grief. Let's go right here. Yeah, because that does absolutely nothing helpful. And here we go. Now you guys see that it's really this is Jeremy's point in the book. There's nothing that's inhibiting Tom's progress here. It's just he has to be careful and cognizant of certain dynamics. But from this position, he's just about got me. And
well, and you'll notice this position that we're in. If Luke did not have the bishop, this would have been a mistake.
Yeah, this would have been a stalemate.
Yeah, I can't do this if Luke didn't have the bishop because this queen is blocking all of these movement squares there.
Yeah.
King is blocking this one access point.
That's a really good point.
He's completely stuck, but because this bishop is free to move, it's not a stalemate.
So you can make the argument, in a sense, if you're careful, you can actually have an easier time against the bishop. Yeah, I'm going to just give the bishop up, which you won't because you just checkmated me. So there you have it. So that's, we just want to show you that first. I'm kind of switching the order up a bit. Next, we want to have a knight and king.
And actually, just to interrupt you real quick, you had said give up the bishop.
Yeah.
Just a big tip to everybody. Like, this is something you'll commonly see, right? And so that bishop comes there, and I guess this isn't the position that I was looking for, but a position could happen like this where the king is completely unable to move, right? Let's say if we moved it into the corner.
Oh, but even there, Tom, even where we just were, it would have been a draw if you took my bishop.
No, because you could have moved up to this square now if I took your bishop.
Oh yeah. Okay, yeah.
That's what I was thinking at first too. I was right there with you. But yeah, like, so if this was the position, for instance, which is violating our rules of, we'll do that so we don't violate the rules, right? It wouldn't be uncommon for black to do something like, if they were here, for black to do something like this with their one extra move. Because it's kind of natural for white to be like, oh, I can grab a piece. But as soon as you do that, you had created that stalemating situation.
Exactly.
And now that king can't move, and so you just got a stalemate by capturing that piece. So that's the real thing that you have to watch out for. If you notice, when I did it, I ignored that bishop altogether. Just completely ignored that bishop. I stayed on my light squares, and I didn't have any sort of problem.
Yeah, one of the biggest tips that I've given beginners, because I was there too, is what's the purpose of chess? What's your goal in chess? It's to checkmate. It's not to gain material. And so if you ever get clouded in your thinking with that, you'll lose out on some of the simplest and most easy wins. So cool. So now that we've gone through that one, our next thing we'll look at is a knight and a queen. And let me throw this knight on here, and let's move the king around here. Let's go like right here. I don't know, somewhere random. Okay, so first off, okay, it's white to move. So Tom, you go first. I'll be the guinea pig with the black again.
I'm white.
I
win.
Oh well, yeah. Let's try that again. That was fantastic. I mean, really, what more could one ask for? Let's go right here. Unlike the bishop, the knight is actually a little more dangerous against the queen because the threat is that knights can really fork well. Like they can do some uh, pretty subtle moves that you can't see it coming if you're not watching closely. And furthermore, a knight is better in protection for his own king when he's next to him than a bishop is.
Just going over a similar principle to the bishops and the light, they're always on the light squares. The knights, obviously they move back and forth between light squares and dark squares and can actually reach every single square on the board. However, if I just highlight real quick the squares that the knight is capable of moving to on his next move, they all share the same color.
Yep.
These are all dark squares. The knight can only move to dark squares on his next move. And then similarly, once that knight ends up moving, right, if I just do that, the knight is now on a dark square and can only move to light squares.
Yep.
So the knight moves back and forth between light squares and dark squares.
It's a good point.
And so because of that, the knight is only able to attack either light squares or dark squares on any given move. And so right here, my king and my queen are both on dark squares. If you want to take a moment to pause the video, I bet you could find the square that if it was Luke's move and he could just take that knight and plop it anywhere on the board, where does he want it? Pause the video. It's right there. That's the spot. If Luke could and he can't, right? On his next move, Luke can't move that knight there. But if Luke could magically put that knight anywhere on the board, that's where he would want it. Because that forks the queen and the king. Yep. Now, if I change it up and I do that, go ahead, pause the video and see if you can find the spot to put the knight. Nowhere. There is nowhere that you can put that knight now. Yep. That is going to be the case with any combination of dark square and light square. So just like we said with the last one, things to watch out for, we said try to avoid putting your queen on that one color, right, on that light square. In this instance, easy thing to watch out for, don't take the same color as your king. As long as you stay on different colors and avoid that single knight move, then you should be fine. So without further ado, we'll just call that my move, Luke.
Yeah, no, and man, thanks for bringing up those points. That's really insightful. And ironically, he actually didn't even mention some of that stuff in the book. So he should have. I'd say he
Ben Feingold that mentioned that stuff.
Yeah, it's good. It's really solid. And it helps you, especially in even faster games, because if you have a principle you can go by that you know for sure you won't be in trouble if you do it, it makes it a lot easier. Okay, so now my move. I think I'm gonna go right. So since I'm in check, let's go.
And
okay.
And just trying to create that box.
Yep. I was gonna say that's exactly what Tom's going for here, you guys. As you can see, though, it is a little more tricky than a bishop. Like, Tom, how are you feeling now compared to how you felt when it was the bishop?
Oh, yeah, you definitely have to think more. Because, I mean, I'm actually going to violate the rule that I said you have to, like, something that you can do easily, right? I said try to stay off the same color as your king. But I always said look out for forking opportunities as well. There's a forking opportunity.
Oh man, I totally missed that too. That was so stinking obvious. It was just right in front of me. But again, this illustrates the point that, you know, it is still really hard if you have the knight and king, because, you know, what are you going to do? Like if the person that has the queen is careful, like everything's golden. So, and then
Yeah,
here's just a queen and king end game. So
yeah. I mean, if Luke didn't go there and give me the forking opportunity, I mean, I don't know.
that was so stupid. Like,
There are so many. The thing is there are always going to be so many forking opportunities, right? Right. So here's a place that I was going to say there's a forking opportunity there. Maybe not.
oh yeah, oh yeah. No, yeah, you can go right here.
Yeah.
Oh no, but then I'm just gonna go here. Yeah, but anyway.
Yeah. Oops. So you know, if we said that was the case, again, what I'm doing is I'm still maintaining that principle of trying to close in the squares that he can move in, and I'm trying to keep opposite squared colors. So
Yeah. So yeah, so that's really all that you need to remember, guys, is just make sure to watch for forking opportunities from both sides. The only difference between this and the bishop is it can be a little more tricky if I didn't play that stupid move. It can be a little more tricky with the person that has the queen, especially if you're in time control, because that knight can really do some deadly forking. So yeah, that's really the only two, like, you know, combination ones that we were going to go over for this one. I also want to bring up, so again, going back to which pieces can checkmate the king as a lone king. So we mentioned, again, last week we mentioned 2 queens, a queen and a rook and a rook, a lone rook, a lone queen, and now we get to some other stuff. There's actually a way to checkmate with 2 bishops, which we're not going to go over today. That's for a further lesson. But you actually can checkmate a king if they have a lone king and you have 2 bishops. It's possible. And then also a bishop and a knight, the hardest lone king checkmate possible. So hard, in fact, that I actually, Tom, I don't know if you do, but I personally don't know off the top of my head how to do it.
I don't know. I don't think I could do a bishop and a knight off the top of my head.
Yeah, I think each of us, we said, can do 2 bishops, but it's really tricky. Like, you'd have to have enough time. And then
Yeah, I mean, given enough time, I probably could figure out a bishop and a knight, and maybe tonight I will. Maybe tonight I'm just going to stay up and be like, okay, how do I do this?
yeah,
It's not going to be easy.
yeah, totally. And like, okay, and then we get to what about a pawn and a king versus a king? Well, you might think, if you're a beginner, you might think, oh, well, a pawn's not worth as much as all these other pieces. A pawn can promote to another piece. So if you can get that with the pawn and king, all that matters is if you can promote it. And then which ones can you not? A lone bishop cannot checkmate a lone king, and 1 knight cannot checkmate a lone king, with it for future exceptions. And 2 knights, even 2 knights, it's not possible to checkmate a lone king unless there's pawns involved. All of these things might change, but so yeah. So as far as minor pieces go, 2 bishops, a bishop and a knight, not 2 knights, and not a lone bishop or knight can do it. So we're cruising right along in this stuff. Now the next thing to go over is how to use our king. And so let me just, I didn't actually plan this out, but let me go ahead and set up this position real quick, Tom, where I'm going to remove the other pieces on the board, and I'm going to just take some pawns, and let's get the kings way out here. Okay. And let's actually do some crazy stuff like this. Okay. So just a random position that I made, but what is one principle that will always remain the most simple and the thing, in other words, from either person's perspective, what is an obvious thing that you need to do here? Tom, how do you want to answer that?
I mean, my go-to when I see an end game like this is get the king in the center of the board.
Exactly. So above all, there's a lot of other things going on here with these pawns and stuff, but at the end of the day, get your king to the center of the board. That's literally the simplest and almost always reigning true principle, that if you follow that in your end games, you need to get we need to get away from being afraid to use our king, especially if you're a lower level player. Once you get all those other pieces off the board, your king flips. He changes, he transforms, if you will, from a very, a scaredy cat that's trying to be protected so he can't get checkmated, to arguably the most powerful piece on the board. And so in this case, Tom, if you are white, you want to go first?
Sure. Oops. Grab that one.
And it's funny. I actually flipped this. Here, let me do some little thingy real quick, because I flipped it so the pawns are in the wrong spot, because I forgot that it was A1 on this side. So let's do that. Okay, I'll let you go again, but I know probably you're gonna.
Gotcha. Was I?
Okay, sorry. See, this is the problem. No, this is the problem when I'm trying to make things theoretical.
Yeah, my pawns look like they're going this way.
Yeah, you're right. This is what you call real-time journey, folks. Let's just do this. There we go. All right, now your turn.
What way do you want my pawns? You want them to go this way? Probably not, right?
Probably not.
Let's flip the board. That way white's on the bottom. I feel like that solves all of our problems, right? No, because now the board's backwards.
Oh, that's what the problem is. Okay.
It is what the problem
is. That whole time, that's like all that I was thinking. Okay.
Yeah, I've got A, B, C, D. So white should be on the side that I'm on.
Yeah, exactly. So let's see. Let's actually just do this. This makes the whole thing simpler. Okay, here we are. This is how I should have done it, not all those pawns. Okay, you go first, and you go first, and you're white. There we go.
Making it to the center of the board.
Okay. Now, one thing you notice, guys, is that after you, so from right here, Tom is already in the center, so he's connected with this pawn, and he would like to advance to E4, but he can't because my pawn's in the way. So he's gonna have to meander around. So I'm going. What in the world did I do? So I'm gonna go ahead and go right here.
I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna make a break for it.
Okay.
All of my plans are foiled. Can't go that way. Guess I gotta go the other way.
So as you guys, I guess what I'm trying to show here, which was painstakingly long for me to get that scenario right. I mean, we can keep on playing here, and we'll get into some other concepts that we haven't touched on yet. But the fact remains, we're both getting our kings in the center of the board. If I had meandered around and didn't do that, Tom would have easily snatched up my pawn. I wouldn't be able to get there. Now, I know that seems super simple from this position, but there are many scenarios where it gets a little more complex. But if you keep that in your mind, you'll be able to, triumph over a situation where normally you'd be really confused. So get your king out there. He's worth his weight in gold when it comes to the end game. Anything you want to add to that before we hit opposition, Tom?
I don't think so.
Yeah, and then of course pawn promotion is key. Like I said, a pawn is worth way more than a minor piece or a major piece if it can actually get, become, a queen and win. Sometimes even you want to promote to other things. Okay, but now we're going to get into the heart of the end game, essentially, which is opposition. Okay, so right here in this position, the two kings are staring at each other face to face. They're in a standoff. And the reason why this is helpful to illustrate is because there's a dynamic in chess called opposition. Well, what is opposition? Both of these kings would like to advance into the other's territory. Now, obviously, there aren't pawns on the board, but if there were, the idea of being able to advance forward will be able to infiltrate your opponent's space. So because these three squares are being contested right now, then all opposition really is the dynamic that whoever has to move from here loses an ability to infiltrate the other space. So let's say it's white's turn. Okay, well, let's say white wants to go here. Well, then black, if let's say there was a pawn over here somewhere, whoa, then black could literally just step in there because white gave up this square. That was one of the three. And so all opposition is the ability to infiltrate your opponent's space with your king when you have, oh yeah, you're going to put a couple pawns.
Yeah, just the same way, the same thing that we showed last time, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
here, and Luke had been here,
Mm-hmm.
and once he moved here, that's why I said, "Oh, rats! My plans were foiled."
Mm-hmm.
That's because I have no chance of moving into. Nope, I can move that. I have no chance of moving to these squares now because I can't move my king that close to his king.
Yeah.
Um,
And so like, okay, yeah, so if we're using this is a good example, Tom. So let's pretend it's black's turn. Well, then if black moves right here, then what you would say in this is black has the opposition. So that the opposition means you're in this setup where both of the kings are staring at each other, but it's the other person's move. So you have the opposition if your kings look like this, and there's one space in between them directly in front, and it's their move. You don't want to have the move in here because they're the one giving up the territory and the space. So that's really the size of it for when it comes to opposition. It's just a matter of so again, if we have some pawns, let's take one pawn. Let's take one pawn. Okay, and then so now let's say you're right here and I'm right here. Okay, so it's white to move. Tom, you want to be white? So using the principles of opposition, what do? You could do that too. That's true. Um, but then I get the opposition. But it doesn't matter because your pawn's two back behind. So the idea is, yeah. So now you lose it because the pawn is two, and yeah. So you see how Tom just infiltrated my space because I failed to stay in line. Now he's going to be able to essentially pass this pawn a lot easier. Because if I go here, well, guess what? Then the pawn has a free ride. So I essentially kind of have to go like right back here. And now from here, it's fairly straightforward. Tom's going to be able to go for it, and I guess we can finish this up. Okay.
oops.
And there you have it. There's literally no way for the pawn to to not be able to become a queen. Ta-da! All right, so yeah, so the whole idea here is opposition allows you to infiltrate your opponent's space, and it gives up, if you have the opposition, it means the other person would like to pass. They would like to not move. They're in a Zugzwang position that we mentioned before, but because they do have to move, then you will be allowed to get into their space and infiltrate their territory.
Black to move right here is the pivotal thing. Black doesn't want to move.
Mm-hmm.
Black
Exactly.
would be if black could just pass. Black passes, and white is like, oh, I got to move the pawn. Black passes, and I'm stuck. Like as long as black can pass, black is just going to be there, and I can't ever move that pawn up.
Mm-hmm.
But black is not allowed to pass in chess, so got to move
Yeah,
here or
exactly.
there. Can't move into any one of these spaces because it would move into the too close to the king.
Mm-hmm.
Either way that they move, as soon as that happens, I'm moving the other way and blocking these three squares.
Exactly. And so another takeaway principle from this is always try to keep your king directly in front of your opponent's pawn. And when your king has to step away from the pawn, always go straight back. So let's go back to here again real quick. Let's actually go right here. Okay, so if it's white to move, white has the opposition, but there's a pawn in the way. So if black moves right back here, white would like to move his king there to maintain the opposition, but he can't because his own pawn's in the way. So in this case, if white goes here, we're going to essentially get to a draw because of what Tom mentioned. So the idea here is black is remembering that you always keep your king directly in front of your opponent's pawn if you can. And then if you can't, then yeah. So the point is, there's nothing that black can do here if white plays it properly. But if black had the opposition and white was directly in front or behind or to the side of his own pawn, then black would force the draw. So always try to keep your king directly in front of your opponent's pawn. And when your king has to step away from the pawn, always go straight back. Number two, don't let your opponent's king step in front of its pawn unless you have no choice. So the fact that Tom, exactly. So the fact that Tom, as white, was now in front of his king, and if it's my move, well, that's the ideal position to be able to get his pawn promoted eventually. Okay. So
yeah, it's weird. The kings are the exact opposite of the rooks because if you have got a rook on the board, you always want your rook behind your pawn.
mm-hmm.
But with the king, the king does a really bad job behind that pawn for trying to get promoted.
Exactly. Okay, so now that we've covered the basics of opposition and what it is and how to use it, the next thing we want to look at is rook pawns. And what is a rook pawn, first of all? Well, you know, at the beginning of the game, you have pawns lined up on all of these squares for each side. And so a rook pawn is simply the pawns that started here. So any pawns on the sides of the board are rook pawns. And so you could have a series of exchanges and stuff in a game and still end up with a pawn that goes to the side. But the thing is, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to get to a point where we're actually able to force the draw as the opposite color with a rook pawn. And I'll show you exactly. We're going to look at two different positions, and we're going to see why rook pawn is different than a regular pawn. So I'm going to set it up like this. White has, okay. So from right here, if we look at this position, it's white to move now. And what do you do as white? Tom, what would you do?
Oh, yeah, I would do this.
Exactly. And why?
Because you have one out of a square, you got to move there, and it's because I have the opposition.
Exactly. And so now I'll have to move here, and then, well, you're going to pop right in there, and then you're going to get a queen. So that is very interesting so again, it's all because there was another square, like Tom said, for me to escape to. However, let's do the same position one over right here. Now it's white to move. And what do you do?
For a draw.
Exactly. Because you see how there's no way white can be productive here. If white advances the pawn, well, then black can't go to either of the two spaces. So it's a stalemate. And if white backs up, well, that's not productive because black just stays right in front of the pawn and will always maintain that. And there's literally no way. So you see, just in looking at these two side by side, these two scenarios, we see very clearly that a rook pawn is a lot more, we say draw-ish than another pawn. So if you're playing a game, simple concept here, right? You're playing a game, you're through the mid game, you're starting to enter the end game. If you notice that your opponent's ahead a pawn, but you can do a series of exchanges and stuff to where they'll end with a rook pawn, that's a lot. Even if you don't know anything else that we just discussed, you'll know that there's a greater percent or greater chance that it will be a draw, that you won't lose. So Tom, do you want to add anything to the rook pawn real quick?
No, I mean, but I think the concept that you're just talking about right there is the really key thing that you have to really acquire in chess. Is that, I mean, that sounds like this really minimal thing, and that's the sort of thing that I remember when I was early on in chess. Like, it wasn't even on my radar.
Right.
But because it was like early on, it was just like capture hanging pieces. I see a hanging piece, I'm going to capture that hanging piece. Well, what happens when you start playing opponents who aren't hanging pieces? I don't know, because I'm always hanging pieces, and so my opponents usually are hanging pieces too. But no, really what you need to be doing is you need to be, every single one of your moves is trying to gain minimal advantage. And if you just gain minimal advantage over time, small advantages here and there, something like, oh, I want to, plan my sacrifices so that way my, the opponent who has one pawn on me, that when it comes down to the end game, the one pawn that I want them to have after all the exchanges is going to be a rook pawn.
Mm-hmm.
If that happen, that increases your chances of winning, in this case drawing, if you're in that losing position. But that's all. That's what you're really fighting for, is identifying those small things that are just going to make things incrementally better for you.
Exactly. Well said. So another principle to just keep in mind is if the defender's king gets in front of his rook pawn, in front of his own rook pawn, then the game, if the defender's king gets in front of your rook pawn that you're trying to promote, the game will always be a draw. So in the position we just showed, the fact that black could get in front of the pawn because white can't advance the pawn, it would stalemate the game. That shows it's instantly a draw. There you go. And just kind of in simple terms here, why is this possible? Because look, there's half the amount of space because it's chopped off. I mean, it's the end of the board, and so the king can only go left. He can't go right. And so that's the whole reason why this exists, why rook pawns are drawish. Cool. Okay. Well, so we've already covered the different pieces that can mate a lone king, bishop versus queen, knight versus queen, using your own king to get into the center of the board, opposition and what that is, and then the dynamic of rook pawn. So we actually did cover quite a bit, you guys. So now we get a chance to test ourselves. And so we're going to set up some scenarios in this test here that I'll do real quick, and then we'll give you a chance to see if you can implement the principles we discussed. Okay, so what we're going to do here is in the first position, we're going to, let's look at it side by side so I'm not messing this up. So we want the black king over here, the white king right here, black bishop right here, and then a queen right down here. Okay, so in this position, this is position number one, it's white to move, and the question is, does white have anything to worry about? Go ahead and pause the video. Okay, so position number one here we mentioned is, the question is, it's white to move, does white have anything to worry about? And Tom, how would you answer that?
Yeah, the biggest thing to worry about is going to be, in this position, probably stalemating.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we are the principle that we discussed of trying to keep your pieces off the same colored squares as the bishop
Mm-hmm.
is something that you want to be aware of, right? The king is already blocking off these 3 squares, which looks really good for white, right? And according to the principles that we discussed from last week, well, it seems like if we just get this queen in this last row, we've got a checkmate. So if I bring my queen over here, boom, that's checkmate, right? That's what I'm going for. But the problem is if I do that, it's not checkmate because there is a legal move that black can do to get his king out of check. There are actually 2 of them. One is this terrible looking bishop coming over here, which results in my queen taking the bishop, and that's now checkmate. So probably not going to do that. But this right here, if he follows up with this, bringing that in, I certainly am setting myself up for a position of stalemate where if I brought my queen to any one of these squares, now there's no legal move for black.
Exactly. It just gives you more chances to mess up.
I mean, you know, just in terms of things to watch out for. You don't want to leave your queen hanging, right? That's an obvious one.
Yeah. So yeah, and to follow up on that, and this, you know, isn't technically part of the question, but if you wanted to look at here, following the principles we've discussed, probably the simplest move for white would be to just plop the queen right here, because then it's a forcing move, right? Because you know that the bishop is just stuck there doing nothing and looking silly. All that black can do is one move, which is here, and then boom, checkmate. And so again, we move the queen onto white squares so that the bishop couldn't do anything. And we're not, like Tom said, we're not going to do anything that can allow for stalemating options. And we see a forcing move where there's only one move option for black. And so that's the simplest way to win because the king's already in the corner. So that is it for position number 1. All right, so position number 2 is we're going to have, let's see, let me make this board smaller so I can do it quickly. Okay, so we got the king over here. We have the queen over here this time. We have the black king right here. And then instead of a bishop, we have a knight that is right here. Okay, so position number 2, white to move. Is king moves to f3 a good move? Is king moves to f3 a good move? Pause the video. Okay. Tom, the question was white to move here. Is king f3 a good move? What do you say?
Well, if I'm just playing bullet chess and I'm just holding to the principles that I said that I stole from Ben Feingold, that would put my king on a white square, and my queen is already on a white square. So I'm thinking that might not be a good idea. Is there a spot where a fork could take place? Right there.
Boom.
Is there. And yeah, that knight definitely can reach that spot. So no, I would not want to move my king there.
Yes. So it's all you have to be aware of. And like you saw the game with Tom and I, when I made that stupid mistake, it was really fast before he took me out. So you could see that, you know, it's not too challenging, but you have to really be careful with those forking options for with the knight. And then also, like Tom said, if you keep your king and your queen on different colors from one another, then there will never be a forking opportunity as well. And like Tom said, if the knight is on light squares, he can only hop to the dark. If he's on a dark square, he can only hop to the light. So those are fantastic points. Okay, so position number 3, moving right along here. So this one may look a lot simpler, but in actuality, it's a little bit more complex.
How's that position 3? 1 second.
Okay.
This isn't a baby. This is a dog.
All right, so while Tom's away, I'm just going to show you, and I'm going to say this is position number 3, and it is black to move. Where should black move his king? So again, position number 3, black to move. Where should black move his king? And go ahead and pause the video. All right, so once again, you guys, it is position number 3 here. And it's black to move. Where should black move his king? Black to move. Where should black move his king? All right. Tom, ideas?
Black to move. Always move backwards.
Yep. Always stay in front of that pawn if you can help it. Because if black moved anywhere else, then white could step in one of these two and have the opposition. But with black moving there, there's nothing white can do that's productive, because after here, black can simply mirror that move so that he's maintained the opposition. And then if white tries to advance the pawn, you get stalemate. If white, instead of trying to advance the pawn, moves like back here or something, well, then there's not really anything that white can do productive, no matter what you do. So that's the idea, is black just has to move back so that he's in front of the pawn still in the same file, and all will be well. And in this case, if we reverse it, just for illustration, if it was white's move here, then it's a little bit different. So if white goes here, then let's say black goes there. So you see right here, yeah, the point is black has to stay in front of the pawn at all times if possible. And that is the simple principle that will almost always apply, under few exceptions, only if there's other pawns on the board too. Okay, position number 4. Okay, and in this case, we actually have a similar looking structure, but the kings are over on the side of the board. Okay, so from here, it's black. This is position number 4. It's black to move. Which king move is correct? Go ahead and pause the video. Okay, position number 4. It's black to move. Which king move is correct? Tom, ideas?
I've only got 2 options here. I want to stick with staying right behind. I don't know that it matters, does it?
Well, actually, and that's a good point. The reason why Tom sounded confused is because he intuitively knew that it doesn't matter what you do, because this position started with the king directly in front of a rook pawn. Then you know instantly that's a draw. So if players knew this, they would offer a draw right away, because there's literally nothing white can do here to be productive. There we go. So that's so again, a king right in front of an enemy rook pawn means draw. Yep. All right. And the 5th and final position here today, this one's going to be slightly different than some of the stuff we covered. But if you remember one of the things we mentioned, this won't be too challenging for you. So what we have here is a king over here. We don't have any pawns on the board, but we do have the other king that's directly in front of him, and 2 knights. Okay, now the question here is, so this is position number 5. It's white to move. Can white win? Go ahead and pause the video. Okay, position number 5 here, white to move. The question here is, can white win? Tom?
Geez, I'm gonna go with yes, just because this position looks complex and really cool.
Yeah, so it is really complex, and that's the thing where if I hadn't kind of gone through this material and really studied this stuff, I would instantly think, okay, like if you're playing in a blitz game or a bullet game especially, it really seems like that there's potential, because look, the king is so close to the side of the board, and all this stuff, it seems to line up with all that we've mentioned so far, except the answer here is no.
Don't have the correct pieces.
So and this really, again, we don't have a pawn here. If there were a pawn, it could change the dynamic a little bit. But since there are no pawns on the board and it's only kings and 2 knights, the knights, unfortunately, together, even as powerful as they are, and they can fork a bunch, but against a lone king like this, they actually can't win against a lone king if the defender plays properly. So with that being said, Tom, would you like to play as black here and see what I can do?
I'll take a shot at this. I'm going to take a shot. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, you want to play as white? Yeah?
Sure, I'll play as white.
Okay, perfect. All right, I'm going to go here. We're going to test this theory.
We're gonna do that. Locking into place a little bit.
Yeah. And you see, like, again, if I didn't go through this material, I would have thought that it's possible, because, I mean, surely 2 minor pieces like this, right?
Oh, I've got to have them now.
And there's actually some, I wasn't going to mention this, Tom, but I think it might be helpful here to just kind of reiterate. In a closed position, knights are superior to bishops. But in an open position, bishops are superior to knights. Well, how does that relate to the endgame? Because we'll eventually go over the fact that 2 bishops can win against a lone king in an open position with no pawns on the board. But this is an open position. 2 knights, well, they're not as powerful. They just can't do it. They can't make it happen. So you see, kind of as we're playing this out here, we're kind of doing a little dance where my king's just kind of meandering around the side of the board, but it's just nothing's really happening. Like, Tom's playing, solid moves, but it's just not.
I gotcha.
The problem here is that it's stalemate.
It's stalemate.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, and it's not only is it hard, it's impossible to win as with the 2 knights. So again, that's one that stumped me too before I looked at this material, because that principle is really, really helpful. So anything else you want to add before we conclude this, Tom?
No, I don't think so. I think you're good.
Perfect. So again, you guys, thanks for joining us. In this week, just to remind you, we went over what can mate against a lone king, bishop versus queen, knight versus queen. We even touched a little on 2 knights here and how that's not possible to checkmate a lone king. And then also getting your king to the middle of the board or the center, opposition with the kings, and the drawishness of rook-pawns. So we're excited to continue this journey with you. Starting next week, both Tom and myself, I can confidently say here, is starting to get into material that neither of us knew at all. So it's really, really exciting. It's going to get harder for us to teach you, so we're going to have to know it. So stay tuned, and we'll look forward to seeing you guys next week. But until then, you know what we say, improve your game.